Welcome everybody. This is our 92nd Reading Online Sport Economics Seminar. We have Katrin Scharfenkamp presenting today. Before she does present, I want to mention a few things. Admin wise, well, actually the first one is if you want to present after Easter in the Roses series, you are very welcome to. I'm currently putting together the schedule for after Easter, so if you would like to present, please do get in touch one way or another with me. Then on top of after that, there are of course a number of a number of conferences taking place. A number of them in May. The first one is I think it's the 16th Gijón Sport Economics Conference, which is in honor of Stefan Kassen. That's on the 6th and 7th of May. I'll put details in the chat as we get going. And your deadline to submit a paper for that is coming up on the 10th of April. The deadline just passed for the European Sports Economics Association Conference in Helsinki. But maybe if you write a nice email, you might still be able to be considered for that. And that's a conference that's in August. Thomas is here, and there's a conference in Rotterdam, Sports Economics Conference in Rotterdam on the 13th of May, featuring a number of stellar presenters. Again, details have been posted in the chat previously, and I'll post them again. And then Thomas is going to be tweeting out stuff later on today. Then following on after that, there is what's now called the 8th Western Football and Finance Conference, which is taking place in a hybrid format. We're going to have a presence in Reading in the UK if you want to join us to be in person, but you can also join the conference virtually as well. You may have submitted a paper and you may have heard from us as organisers in the last few days, but that's the 8th Western Football and Finance Conference taking place on the 26th and 27th of May. That's enough for conferences. I'll put them all in the chat as we go along, as Katrin gets going, in case you want the details to submit. But Katrin is going to present research entitled "Do Women Perceive a Payoff from Working Without Pay? A Gender Comparison of Volunteering in European Grassroots Football." I don't want to stop her any longer, so please, Katrin, take away your presentation.
Thank you. So can you see my screen?
Yep.
So...
And I can tell you're also in the normal place as well, so you're not masquerading in front of your slides today.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So yeah, thank you for having me today. I'm very happy to present a project that is at a very early stage, so any comments are very welcome. Pamela Vicker, Tim Torman, Larissa Davis, and myself are investigating if women perceive a payoff from working without pay, so volunteering in sport, especially in European grassroots football. First, I want to outline a short motivation, what is the background of our research question, and to give you a brief overview of the relevant literature, followed by some theoretical framework and the derived hypotheses. Then I will explain the methodological approach to you, present some empirical results, and finally conclude. So even though volunteering is an activity that is not paid, so you don't have any monetary benefits from it, there is a huge number of people who are volunteering in sport. And we know from the literature that it has some positive effects on subjective well-being and other non-monetary benefits. However, there's also a small strand in the literature focusing on outcomes in the labor market, such as wage premiums in terms of enhanced earnings, etc. But the link in between, to which extent volunteers really perceive this activity to be relevant for the career, for the job market situation, is investigated less so far. We found in the literature that volunteering might improve job performance in general, wages, labor market participation as such, so that women work more than just part-time, job satisfaction, but also job searches due to contacts or new networks in sport clubs, as well as turnover intentions are increased. If you are volunteering, maybe because you find out that there are more possibilities for you in the labor market than you knew before. So far, gender differences in the evaluated benefits of sport volunteering are not investigated with respect to the job market situation, and this is what we want to find out. We know that there are some studies on gender differences in sport volunteering, focusing on different outcomes, but we want to focus on, kind of the relevance of sport volunteering to the individual job market situation. Our theoretical framework bases on signaling theory. So following this approach, we would assume that individuals might use sport volunteering as a signal in their applications for new jobs or to present themselves on the job market. And there are several characteristics that are associated with volunteering, such like altruism, or that you have a very high intrinsic motivation, maybe to help each other or to engage in your hobby, in your private interests apart from the job, collective values, so that you join the community and that you have the ability to work in teams, which is really important in labor markets today. But also leadership and communication skills. If you have a coaching position or a referee position in the sport clubs, can be related to sport volunteering and be a signal in applications for jobs. So there is, we have the assumption that sport volunteering might be a positive signal to the labor market because it is related to this list of items. And in general, both genders should benefit from sport volunteering regarding their job market situation. However, women face in most industries of the labor market a gender gap. It can be a gender wage gap or gender pay gap in terms of that wages are significantly smaller than those of men, or that industries are male dominated as such, so that women have problems to get jobs in certain industries like the STEM sectors. Would be a kind of access discrimination to these positions. But even though overall 47% of the labor force in European countries is female, we also know that there is a problem to find qualified women for top positions, or to even get qualified women into these positions due to old boys networks, etc. So we know of the problems that international labor markets have to integrate women, to include women to these top positions or all industries, and to pay equally. So that following social role theory, there might be a higher need for women to invest in sport volunteering as a positive signal to the labor market. Social role theory assumes that the gender is critical to the expectations of other individuals because the gender is associated with the individual behavior. While the majority of leadership positions, also a lot of sectors are dominated by men, these attributes of men are predominant in these fields, so that women who are applying for, e.g., these leadership positions, have problems to convince the employers that they are able to fulfill the requirements. So since there's this dominance of men in history, role incongruities between women and jobs or leaders as such were established, and women have problems to overcome these barriers. And so sport volunteering might be a possibility, a positive signal to overcome these barriers. So we assume in our first hypothesis that women are more likely than men to evaluate volunteering in grassroots football clubs as a good signal to the job market than men. And we also assume women are more likely than men to evaluate volunteering in grassroots football clubs as an opportunity to improve this job situation. Here are some information about our data set. Pamela Wicker and Tim Tormann conducted a survey from 2020 to 2021, and they targeted volunteers and club members in European football clubs in 7 countries. These were England, France, Germany, Italy, Norway, Poland, and Switzerland. The questionnaire adapted to countries and was translated by national associations. And the raw sample contains 21,759 observations. After excluding all missings for our run estimations, we are left with 21,558 observations, of which 17,582 are volunteers. Here you have a nice overview about the start of the survey in each country, when did it end, and how many clicks did we get, etc. But I think, this is less interesting. I will continue to the variable definition. The survey included 2 questions where participants were asked to rate the agreement on a 5-point scale from totally disagree to totally agree to the following statements. The first statement was, volunteering experience will look good on my CV. This would be the question that we used to test our first hypothesis. And for our second hypothesis, we will use the question, volunteering allows me to explore different career options. We also have a set of interesting control variables, of which I want to show you some more information about the volunteering roles that we asked the participants to signal us. In the first step, we have administrative roles. These are presidents, treasurers in accounting, secretaries, sport officers, youth officers, committee members, roles in web and IT, marketing and sponsoring, or press reports. On the other hand, we also have operational roles such as medical support, organization of football games and tournaments, organization of social events, club activities, catering, maintenance, facility management, groundkeeping, cleaning, etc. Sports roles are differentiated in 2 types. This is being a coach or being a referee. So here you have a nice overview of all variables that we included in our regression analysis. I present you the dummy variables for this overview. These are all those participants who agreed with this statement. So if they have 4 or 5 agree or totally agree to the statement, then these dummy variables were coded with 1. And you can see that the agreement that sport volunteering looks good on my CV was supported by 63% of respondents in the overall sample. And here we can see that more women on average agreed to the statement than men, with 74% to 62%. Then we also have the dummy variable for the career options. And there the agreement is quite similar. In the full sample, it is on average 40%, like for men, and for women it is slightly more with 43%. We have 13% women in our sample. And yeah, then we have the hours that the volunteers invested on average in the administrative, sports, and operational roles. And here you can see that on average 9 hours or 9 to 10 hours are invested in administrative tasks, and that men have more hours in these tasks than women, with 9.73 to 8.74. Sport hours are on average 11 hours, and yeah, there we have much less women, with 5 hours compared to 12 hours for men. Operational hours are more for women, with 8 hours, and only 6 hours for the full sample, as well as for men. We also differentiate between different age generations. The first generation is 18 to 34 years, 35 to 49 years, and 50 to 65 years. And the reference group, which I missed, I'm very sorry, are those who are older than 65 years. You can see that 31% of the respondents are 18 to 34, 35%, which is the majority, are in the mid-age of 35 to 49, and 24% are older than 50 years. We have 10% respondents with a migrational background, which are coded as foreigners. 8% have a disability, 36% a primary degree, etc. Below, you can also see the distribution of respondents among the countries. Yeah, where you can see that the majority are from Germany, Switzerland, and yeah, Norway. So we ran OS regressions, and I wanted to show you the models that we estimated before I show you the tables. Yeah, we want to explain the agreement to these statements for the CV or the career options by explaining it through the gender. So is our respondent female or not? The hours that the respondent invested in administrative roles, sport roles, and operational roles, the age generation, if he is a foreigner or not, and the further controls regarding income, education, etc. Then this is more an exploratory task that we exercised. We wanted to find out if there might be any effects regarding the volunteering roles if we test for the interaction terms of female with administrative hours, sport hours, or operational hours. In addition, there might also be a bias regarding the age group. So the first two age groups from 18 to 34 years or 35 to 49 years might have more career ambitions than the older generations. So maybe volunteering plays a different role in these generations, so that we also wanted to test for gender differences within these generations. And we also wanted to find out if a migrational background is relevant for possible gender different effects on the evaluation if sport volunteering is relevant for the CV or career options. These are the regression results. First, I present you the results if the respondents agreed with the statement that sport volunteering looks good on their CV. And we see that the gender female is significantly positively related to higher values of this metric variable. We also see that respondents volunteering more hours in sport roles have a significant positive association with an agreement that sport volunteering is relevant for the CV, and we see a high relevance for the age groups 18 to 34 years. Admittedly, we find no significant effects regarding the volunteering roles for female respondents, as well as for the age groups or for the migrational background as such. Further, we tested the agreement to the statement if sport volunteering is relevant for future career options of the respondents. And here we do not find really significant gender effects. So the effect in column 1 for the variable female is only significant on the 10% level, which is quite weakly given the number of observations that we have. So we would conclude that we see no gender different effects. We see that respondents working in sport roles have a significant positive association with the agreement to the statement. And we find that women in operational roles have a significant positive link to an agreement with the career options statement. As suggested, the younger age groups from 18 to 35 years or 35 to 49 years are also positively linked to the statement that sport volunteering is relevant for the career options. However, we also do not find any gender different effects. But we find that respondents with a migrational background are also positively linked to the career option statement. However, there are no gender different effects so far. So the key findings are more or less that women were significantly more likely to agree to the statement that volunteering is a good signal to the job market in terms of looks good on my CV. By contrast, we find no significantly different evaluation of sport volunteering as an opportunity to explore different career options. And yeah, we think that in a way this might help club officials to maybe acquire more women for sport volunteering positions. To know what is important or what is more important for women than maybe for men. So we can see that women are not necessarily use sport volunteering as an opportunity to push their career as such, but they might think that it is more or less necessary statement on the CV. So this would be the way that I interpret these findings. Our contribution is that we have quantitative evidence on the signaling human capital benefits of sport volunteering differentiated by gender for the context of European football. And we have a very detailed assessment of the different roles that one can take in sport volunteering, even though we find no gender different effects, which might also be an interesting new fact for club officials. We provide a theoretical underpinning, linking sport volunteering with signaling and social role theory to outline these human capital benefits, and we use a large multi-country sample. One limitation of our study is that our study is limited to football volunteers, so if you would include different sports, the results might be different. And the surveys were conducted before the COVID-19 pandemic and are only cross-sectional. So this might also limit our findings in a way that they are not applicable to years after the pandemic or during the pandemic. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Katrin. Lots of time for questions and comments. Anyone with any questions and comments, please do raise your hand. Dennis.
Hey, Katrin, thanks for the interesting talk. I have one comment that I think is about making a more general story than the one that you've given, and then I have a couple of questions about the data. So my comment is that a very common thing in the US these days is what's called an unpaid internship. And you could think of that as volunteering. What you have here then is a way of thinking about, is there gender differences of thinking about the value of these unpaid internships, which goes, cuts across far more industries and circumstances than just sport. So I think that you have that possibility. The questions about the data, the first thing that occurred to me was more than a third of your observations come from Switzerland, the smallest country in your data. And I'm a little bit concerned that you may not be getting a general effect, but getting an effect that's being driven by a very small country being so important. What I would suggest, and I think this is a perfectly reasonable thing to do, is to estimate each of those models on each of the country subsamples and then test to see if the coefficients are all equal. My hunch is that they're not. And I just think that would make your story more convincing, maybe. So those are my comments and questions.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Yeah, indeed, it might be at least interesting to test Germany versus Switzerland, as we have a comparable number of observations here. I think for Poland and France, we only have a small number of observations, so I have to see if the models hold. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I also thought about that Norway as one of the most gender equal countries, with having the first gender quota since 2008, etc., might also reveal different evaluations of the women there than in other countries. So yeah, this is a good point. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Dennis. Thanks, Katrin. More questions and comments? Stefan.
Hi, Katrin. Yes, thank you. It's very interesting. I have a question, which I think you sort of alluded to in your introduction, and I wondered if your data could shed any light on it. It strikes me that, what kind of club you're volunteering in could make a significant difference. So particularly, I'm thinking about, for example, football clubs where the club is a mixed club, predominantly run by men, as opposed to an all-women's club where the women are in charge. And there is some literature on this that suggests it presents a challenge for women to integrate into clubs that have historically been controlled by men. And I think this raises an interesting question about, and it has always been a question about gender and whether separate development is actually beneficial to perhaps beneficial women, like all-girls schools, for example. So I just wonder if your data could shed any light on that issue. Maybe they had a better experience of volunteering, or had a more positive view of volunteering in an all-women's club than in a mixed club.
As far as I know, but Tim is also online, so if I tell something wrong, he can just jump in. As far as I know, we do not have this information per club, but I know a database that has this information on a country level. So in a way, maybe I could combine your comment with that of Dennis in a way that I can control for the prevalence of women in football leadership positions, maybe on the club level. I know that we have this information for federation levels, but this might be interesting to work out a bit more, or maybe also use some measurements regarding the popularity of women's soccer in this country, because in Norway women's soccer is much more popular compared to maybe France or other countries. But thank you for this comment, Seven. This is very important. I made a note, and maybe we can merge our data set with some external data to cover it.
I'd be very interested to see what you find.
Yeah.
Thanks, Stefan. More questions and comments? I've got the old excuse that I did have a few questions I was going to ask you, Katrin, but then already Stefan and Dennis asked them all in much better ways than I could have ever managed to. But Stefan's got his hand up again, so go on, Stefan.
Well, just following up on the same idea in some ways. I mean, it seems to me that the identity of the club might matter in whether you enjoy it. So working for, you know, a very successful club that's going places and being very effective, it's probably much more enjoyable than working in some remote club which struggles and can't get a team out and, you know, loses all the time. And so I just wonder if you could collect data on the clubs themselves. You must know the identity of the club to which they're affiliated, and so some measure of success. Say just which tier of football are they playing at, which would be one thing. I would think that would make a difference to.
So you mean some success measurements per season or so?
So I think there's two things there. I mean, there's one issue is what level are you at? Are you Bayern Munich, or are you Rainer? It's the name of a small German town that I know, but you know, that might be one difference. But then there's the other, but it's separate differences. Did you win the championship this year, right? So even if you're Rainer and you won your championship in your league, then presumably you're feeling better about the world than if you Bayern and you came bottom of the league this year. So that's just one way of I think two dimensions to the same thing. And I don't know how easy, again, all of that you could collect, but it's obviously time and effort and work. So I mean, but if you could control for that, I think it would be interesting to see.
Yeah, that's true. I think that at least the looks good on my CV variable might be linked to the success of the football club that I'm naming in my CV. So that might have an impact if you're stating, I volunteered at Bayern Munich or I volunteered at Bielefeld's football club. So yeah, I see your point. So very good. Thank you, Stefan.
Thanks, Stefan. Peter's got his hand up as well.
Maybe it's just me, but I've always liked when you do comparison of means, some sort of just simple statistical test to see if they're different. Because you report the differences, but then are they statistically significantly different? It's not an important concept, but sometimes I like to see that in the comparison of mean table.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, Peter. Thomas.
Yeah, so building a little bit on what Stefan was saying, and from my own experience, the club that I support, we currently have done something really awful in terms of public relations. And having the club on your CV might actually be a bad thing at the moment. So is there something? So to give you the example of what my club did, is they recruited the director of Ajax, which was rightly punished for a big Me Too case in the Netherlands, and the club gave him a new job now, a couple of weeks after he was ousted at Ajax. So it's probably a really bad signal right now.
Yeah.
So is there scandals like that you could possibly, because that would be, I would never say now that it looks good on my CV that I've volunteered there, right? So
I know that we have a database in Germany called LexisNexis, which is summarizing these newspaper titles in a way, so one could simply search for keywords like Me Too, Norwegian soccer, etc. But not that I am aware of, and I quite followed the press in a way. But this is a good point. This might also, be associated with the general gender equality in a country. Like this scandal would be much more important in Norway, where women are really promoted and paid not equally to men, but treated equally in terms of promotion, etc. So I think this would be a very quick search that we can conduct, at least for the 2 years where the survey ran. So quite interesting remark. Thank you, Thomas.
I have nothing to do with the hiring itself, so just to be clear. And
I know.
Thanks, Thomas. Dennis.
The comments of Stefan and Thomas made me think about the timing of the questionnaire. So I can well imagine that someone might think that having this on their CV when they apply or go into the process is different than what they think after they've been a volunteer. And that's really kind of what Thomas has just suggested. When I started, I thought this would be great. And then the club hired this misogynistic jackass, and now I look like an idiot. So and I don't believe that you can do this because you have a cross section, but if you could distinguish between what they thought before they took the job and what they thought after they were in the job, that would be really helpful. And I'm sure you can't do that with your data, but I think that's a limitation you ought to think about.
Yeah. So what we can do, I just estimated these equations for the volunteer sample. One might have a look at the subsample of those who do not volunteer. So we could cover, in a way, not entirely, I know, but we could cover this difference between expecting benefit of volunteering and experienced benefit, more or less, from volunteering, because you have not perfect, but more information when you volunteer than if you do not. Even though we cannot control for the subsamples of respondents who did not volunteer, if they volunteered before or not, we do not know that. So but you are right, this is a limitation of our study, that we do not exactly know if they really experience it or just think or suggest that it might be a benefit. Thank you, Dennis.
Thanks, Dennis. Stefan.
I think Dennis just called Thomas an idiot, didn't he? It's a good job this is via Zoom, right? Otherwise we'd have a fist fight on our hands. Once you start to think about these things, you can think of everything. So here's another thing, which I again don't want to burden you down, but also it strikes me that when you fill in this questionnaire, could have quite a big difference about how you're feeling. So on a midwinter's night when it's dark and it's raining and it's really miserable, it might be very different from how you feel like now when it's spring and everything's feeling good and you're thinking, yes, yay. So maybe you should think about controlling for the date on which they completed the questionnaire as well, just to see as well that's control.
That's a good point. Thank you.
If Thomas will be in Michigan next week, I'll buy him a beer as an apology for implicitly calling him an idiot.
I am coming. So
okay.
I will agree to organize the bar fight at about 10 o'clock on a Friday night.
And who's going to live stream it? That's the next question.
And I know for a fact Thomas has experience in bar fights.
This seminar is taking I take no questions in this seminar, right? So let this be noted.
Okay, any more questions, comments? You may have covered it, Katrin, but one of the points earlier, I think it was from Stefan, made me think about the local employment conditions you might have in a region or even a country. I don't know, are you able to control for that at the moment?
I think we only could merge this data on the country level. I'm not sure if we have the postal codes or any regional codes, but I can look it up. This is a quite good point. You mean to which extent unemployment is relevant for the respondents, or what was your thought?
I guess I'm just thinking that if the labour market is booming, it might be that it is a different signal, a better signal. You might be more optimistic about it being a better signal in a more booming market, or in a different country as well. It might be that different places value these kinds of experiences differently.
Yeah, this might also be linked to Dennis' comment about Switzerland and the small country conditions. Yeah, this is definitely a point that we have to think about more, the characteristics of countries and employment, maybe also the size of the gender wage gap, etc. So yeah, interesting thought. Thank you very much, James.
No worries. Any more? Oh, Dennis has got his hand up. There we go.
So I think one way to address that that James just raised is essentially the idea that Stefan raised with the dates. So if you have the date when they completed the survey, then you can do month fixed effects or something to accomplish sort of labor market circumstances or general economic circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dennis.
Any more questions and comments? Okay, well, thank you very much, Katrin. Thank you very much, everybody, for discussion. We do look forward to this live streaming next week, which may conflict with next week's Roses seminar, which takes place at the same time, same place, April the 8th, next Friday. Arnaud Chevalier from Royal Holloway, University of London, the dynamics of racial discrimination, evidence from fantasy football. So I was going to thank you, everybody. Thank you, Katrin. Have a great weekend. See you all soon.
Thank you, everybody, for the remarks. Bye.